All right, welcome everybody to the December 16th meeting of the Single Exit Multiplex Housing Tag. Dustin, if we can take a roll call, and I am here.
Thank you. Dan Young, not seen in the room. John Hall, not seen in the room. Joe Mayo, not seen in the room. Andy Lorenz,
I'm present, sir.
thank you. David Kinley, not seen online. Jeremy Moore, not online. Jonathan Goldsmith,
Present.
thank you. Robert Baglio, not seen online. Michael Wright, it's not online. Jesse Bank, not online. Shweta Sinha, not seen online. Mike Messer, not seeing. David Lynham, not seeing online. Rich Geisky. Rich, I saw you unmute, but I didn't hear you. I think your mic input might be down. I think I barely heard you.
How about now?
There you go.
Bingo. New computer.
All righty. Thank you. Spencer Gardner, not seeing online. Rich Williams,
I'm here.
thank you. John Sue,
Here.
thank you. With that one, we are sitting with a quorum.
Okay.
What about Derek Hugel?
Oh, I'm sorry, Derek. Something I left you, I skipped you. So it's Derek, thank you for voicing your presence.
No worries.
And this is John Hall. I arrived late. I'm here.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
All right. And is there anybody from the public that would like to introduce themselves? Patrick, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. This is Patrick Hanks with the Building Industry Association of Washington.
Thank you. Welcome. Anybody else? I am not seeing on my list. Okay, so just an introduction. We do have the single exit work on the agenda. If we can hopefully get through that quickly, the multiplex housing work, I also believe that we are um, in the final stretch. The other business, I will ask about scheduling one more meeting, which I think we are going to need. If for no other reason, I think we need to, even if we get through everything on the multiplex, I would like to allow everybody time to sit down and read through a final read through. So we will be trying to schedule another meeting. I'll do that under the other business. So with that, if we could get a motion to review and approve the agenda.
So moved, John Sue.
Thanks, John.
Second. Andy.
Thanks, Andy. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, agenda is approved. Agenda item 3, sorry, is a single exit work. So Dustin, I guess if you can bring up the topic, yeah, I was going to look at the topic that just to kind of remind everybody where we were at with it.
One moment here, it'll pop open. All right.
So on the list, last time there was conversation about the user note, and I think that is the one outstanding item that we in the document we need to look at. We voted that there was not a requirement for duplicate in the IFC. There is still a question as if we should have a pointer in the IFC preface to the appendix. And then let's see, we did vote for the exception in chapter 10. To add that to chapter 10 of the IBC. So with, I guess, Dustin, now if you could bring up the current document. So
And
currently there are two user note options. And Dustin kind of reminded me that Ardell was also, who I don't think Ardell is on yet. She was going to look at wondering if she could take those two and kind of work them together and take one more pass at the user note. So what I am going to remind everybody or suggest to everybody is that at our next meeting, we will have these two options, maybe a third. So I think at the next meeting, we will wait to approve this until the next meeting as well. And we will have pretty much just the user note to figure out or decide upon. What I would ask is everybody, we've gone through a whole lot. It's a pretty comprehensive document. I'm really, really proud of where we've ended up. But everybody, I would suggest you go through one more, read through it. If you've got any questions, make sure you bring it up at the next meeting. I do want to remind everybody of the approval process from here on out. At our next meeting, whenever that is, we will hopefully vote to approve this and move it along to the BFRW committee. That meeting is on, the BFRW committee meeting is on January 16th. Theoretically, if the BFRW doesn't have any comments or questions, it will then move on to the full council on the January, I believe it's the 25th meeting. Assuming the council approves it, it will then go through the CR 102 process. We will have public hearings. If that process is concurrent with the full 2024 IBC code CR 102 process or not, I'm not yet sure, but I just wanted to spell that out so everybody knows there will be a full public comment period on this. So that includes if we come up with anything, but so I think we're really close. I think the only outstanding item I would ask is this question about a pointer in the IFC preface to appendix. And Dustin, I'm not clear what that question was. We decided that it didn't have to be duplicated in the IFC. Are we suggesting that we somewhere in the IFC have a pointer that just points out that there is this appendix? Is that the question?
that was kind of the question that was asked is, if this is standalone, we've got the hierarchy of codes in Washington, and the building code sits above the fire code in order of precedence. But for folks who might not dwell in the IBC world every day, the thought is that a hint that there is an appendix that might address the single exit buildings in the IFC would be good, be it the preface or somewhere else.
Okay, John?
Given that the IFC pretty much takes chapter 10 and duplicates it, I'm wondering if there are a couple ways you could handle it. One would be to do a similar carry through, the amendment that we've made to 1006.3.4. The other way to do that would, if we just want a hint, is to put a user note there.
When you say there,
Sorry, IFC, their
I-
corresponding section in the IFC. And that's not a formal amendment. It's just like, hey, this thing is there.
And is the concern fire officials in reviewing it? Is that what the concern comes from?
I think it's more that down the road, the fire officials are enforce, existing buildings exiting to some degree, during their annual inspections and things like that. So it would be good that they know that, yes, this is okay.
Okay. Jonathan, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd say if we're going to make mention of the IFC, that we would put it in chapter 1032, maintenance of the means of egress, and just put a note or a pointer in there back to it. So that way, if a fire official is doing an inspection, they'll have that pointer handy.
So you said 1032?
1032, maintenance of the means of egress.
You could hold that up, Dustin.
Yeah.
While he's doing that, I was going to say if it was just a review, I wouldn't think it would be necessary at all. There will be if somebody designs, if a designer uses this appendix, it will get submitted and the fire official will, in the review of it, will figure out that it's per the appendix. But I can see if it's at inspection time after the fact, existing buildings, that it might be a good idea. Chapter 10.
And so did we have a subsection in 1032 2.2?
Yeah, do we have a
Not one that it neatly fits into, but I think a note in the somewhere in this section, maybe the general where it tells the accordance with, or so that's if we put anything in there, that's where I think it should be put, because that's where it's going to be used by fire officials.
Rich?
Yeah, I was going to suggest maybe under the general section 1032.1.1 as a state amendment, is just as a note that says single exit stairs, blah, 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 refer to the IRC appendix, blah, blah, blah. Something that points us back there when we're applying the section of the IRC, that go back and look at that section of the IRC.
Well, it would be the IBC.
Yeah.
Or
Sorry.
single exit.
I'm still confusing the two. I apologize.
Oh, I know. I saw a thumbs up. John, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I mean, you could take the language, what that Rich, in the location that Rich suggested, just take the language straight from we were going to amend 1006.3.4, the new item 6 there that we're adding through this. It just says Group R2 apartment houses complying with, we would say IBC Appendix XX shall be permitted to have a single exit.
So just duplicate the amendment in the corresponding section?
Yeah, in 1032.1.1 as Rich suggested.
Oh, duplicate it in that section, but take the language from, sorry.
Yeah, it's way down there. It's highlighted in yellow down further.
Yeah, right there.
That one.
Yeah.
And you just have to add IBC appendix, correct?
Yes.
And that would be as 1.1 in the IFC section.
That's what Rich is suggesting. That would be fine with me. Looks like Ken's got to come.
Yeah, go ahead, Ken.
So for the fire guys, if we put it in 1032, and the expectation is that we are enforcing the requirements in the appendix of the building code, how are you going to write that up? And do you have the authority to enforce the building code in your jurisdiction just based on a reference or not? That would be my question, is how do you put it in our general section to reference that other code, and just making sure that you guys feel comfortable that you guys can enforce that appendix?
Well, I guess this is the only fire guy on the call currently. I'm as you guys are chatting, I'm trying to noodle through, like, where would we want to find the pointer, and why would we want to know there was a pointer that would take you out of the building code chapter 10 for egress and into the appendix? And how do we look at that? And I'm noodling that through. Give me a minute.
Okay, well, I mean, this is something, Rich, if you need to noodle and there are other fire folks, I think it can be an outstanding question today. I think that we are in relative agreement that there should be a pointer. Current proposal is to put it there. I think that we can noodle on Ken's question, and if there is a discussion or a suggestion that the pointer is some other place that would be better, we can address that at the next meeting prior to final approval as well.
Okay. Yeah, let's put a pin in this for now, and then we can circle back, and I'll give it some thought as we chat today.
Okay.
So just before we finish putting the pin in it, does this look like a nice starting off point for the what we're talking about here, an exception to 1032.1? And then I can leave this in the draft document for people to mull over.
I think so.
Okay.
Is it proper to be an exception? I don't know. That seems a little bit odd to me, calling it an exception from.
I like the previous idea, make it 1032.1.1.
No, you have.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay. I am going to ask, is there anybody that has a concern with that? Knowing that either, Rich, if you've got something that comes up later in the meeting today, we can bring this back up. I'm not opposed to going back to agenda item 3 if you have a good, a good comment. Also, we can run this or we can noodle on it for 2 weeks or 4 weeks whenever we have the next meeting and have this as an outstanding item. Andy?
And just a little wordsmithing, does that mean shall comply in there? Just where it says apartment houses complying. Oh, I guess it says complying. I misread that. My apologies.
Yeah, I think it seems right to me that we're okay. Jonathan?
So my thought about putting it here is it's not going to change the way that fire is doing an inspection. It's just going to let them know that they don't have a second exit they're looking for if it's built under that, because it would have been designed under the appendix, but we're not doing nothing inspection wise would change that the fire official's doing.
Is that in response to Ken's question about do you have the authority? Does this give you the authority and you're suggesting that you're not changing anything? It's just the pointer?
Correct.
Okay.
I don't think it changes because you wouldn't be enforcing anything. It would just be like this was only designed under this with one exit. So now we're not going, hey, where's the second exit at?
Okay. Ken?
Yeah, and I get that and I agree with that. I'm just wondering, was the intent was having the fire code be the maintenance of this appendix section in the IBC? Is that the intent of the fire official, making sure that all of those requirements in that appendix are being maintained or not?
My idea is the intent is that to notify a fire official doing an inspection, the reason why there might only be one path of egress in that apartment building.
And I understand that for the one path of egress, but all of the conditions for that one path of egress are, and is it expected that fire official be the one verifying that those are still being maintained?
Rich, go ahead.
I think the maintenance of the means of egress is going to apply regardless of the building or the number of exits. And as I'm thinking more about this, I think really where this pointer should go is instead of in 1032, it should probably go under 1006.21 as an exception. So 1006.21 is requiring 2 exits when you exceed the occupant load in table 1006.21, and allowing 1 exit in these R2s would be an exception. So it would be exception number 4 when these are built in accordance with Appendix XX, are allowed to have 1 exit. So it would, if you only want to have 1 exit, it would be an exception to the 2 exit rule, and it would take you back to the appendix to see all the details about how it would need to be constructed. And then we just leave the maintenance alone because it would allow a single exit. So you go back to that, you say, well, why is there a single exit? And you go back and you would see the exception in the number of exit section. Or it goes in under this section for the single exits. Either one would probably work.
Yeah. That was my original suggestion, was just put in that's the same identical section in chapter 10. But either way, in answer to and not being a fire official or having been one, my thought for Ken would be the jurisdiction would be following whatever they ordinarily do. Some will go down to the letter of the code, and others will say, this is as far as we're going to go on our, and that's the way I would expect this would carry through.
Yeah, I understand that, but unfortunately, the jurisdiction on this one doesn't get a choice. They have to adopt the appendix. That's why I thought it would be best at the beginning when the decision was made not to duplicate it in the fire code. I think duplicating it would solve more things than create problems, because then it just gives that fire official the ability to enforce something that the state has mandated. But all right, I'll bow out, let you guys finish it out.
Okay, Richard. Oh, Rich. I don't know who is first. I think Rich.
Richard is.
Okay, Richard.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I think Rich Geisky was pointing out 106.2.1, which is spaces with a single exit. You should be looking at 106.3.4 for single exits. Rich, maybe you can correct me if you were thinking something different, but I thought maybe you were just referencing the one section instead of what we should be referencing.
Yeah, I mean, it could be either, I think, but yeah, I mean, I think the question is going to be, most people are going to look at these buildings and go, why is there only 1 exit?
Yeah.
And so you're going to want to go.
Right. 106.2.1 refers to spaces in a building with a single exit, whereas 106.3.4 is exits for the building.
Fair.
Dustin, are you showing 106.3.4?
Yes.
right now? Okay.
Yeah, this is the fire code sections.
My personal thought is adding exception or condition 6 to this single exit. Is there by doing it, we are not copying and duplicating, but we are pointing to the appendix. So it is in the IFC. Is there any negative to doing it in 106.3.4? I'm not aware of it. So yeah, if you can go back. Your numbering got off there, Dustin, but
In here?
No, 6 needs to be 1 if you're in the IFC.
Oh,
It,
here.
yeah.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4. Something is still. Oh, I'm sorry. I think you got the wrong one. It is, hang on. Up above, you changed. Yeah, I guess that's right. That's right.
Nice. It's fun. Okay.
There we go. And then that's 6.
I can make it all line up pretty later.
And you probably need to add the International Building Code in front of appendix like you had before. Okay. Um, can we, yeah, there you go. So I guess I would like to go ahead and have a vote on this. So if I could have a motion and a second, and then we can have any discussion. Final approval will still be next week, but that's kind of the final approval for everything. So could I have a motion to approve that?
Move to add item 6 as shown.
Thanks,
Second.
John.
Richard?
Thanks, Richard. Any additional discussion? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. So again, there will be, Dustin, I think, after the meeting today, we need to get this all up, including this language, update the topics summary for the fact that we addressed that issue today. And a final review, and then whenever we have our next meeting, we will hopefully approve this and move it along. So with that, I would like to, Dustin, I know you're still working on stuff. I would like to move along to agenda item number 4, which is the multiplex housing work. And when we look, if you can go to the next tab on the multiplex. Thank you. We have a number of yellow items. There are the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 are all egress related. And then there's the EV charging, exterior porches, and then code correlation. So John, and then John, I know that you have the reconfiguring. I'm gonna let you decide what's the best way. I do want to make sure, basically, the big ask today is for us to all agree on the egress items. So
Well, we can probably go through it again, because I did present this before, kind of introduced it a couple meetings ago. We've made a couple edits since then, but I can certainly share my screen and go over it. I guess, and then we can go back and say, okay, given this, if people are okay with this, then we can go through the issues list and say what's been addressed and what hasn't.
Okay, and John, that sounds fine. Are you going to go through code language? When you introduced it, you kind of had, um, I don't know, is it?
I had diagrams, I had figures, yeah, that we kind of went through. Yes, I intend to go through the code language. Uh,
Okay,
yeah.
yes. Let's go through the code language and then we'll go back and visit the topic summary and see if
Okay.
there's any.
Do you want to see the strike through the word track changes version or the cleaner version? It might be easier, a little bit easier to see what's going on.
I'm going to say cleaner version unless somebody.
Okay. All right. I have the other one up also if we need to look at that. So I'm prepared to if someone has a question, then I can certainly bring that up and show what's going on. Okay, I will go ahead and share screen then. Okay, let me make sure I get all of this.
And John, can can you tell us, is this the document that was posted and which one?
Okay, so this is the I think the okay, no, this is not exactly the one that's posted because the one that was posted does not have the comments in it. This is the Word version of that same document, however. And let me look at what the
This one should be the V2, not markup one.
okay. Thanks, Dustin.
The V2, I thought that was the EV charging.
Well, Patrick has a V2 one labeled as EV charging.
There's one that's labeled oh gosh, what was it?
I have a JS and I have a R.
Yeah.
R
The baseline reorganization proposal, John Sue V2, without the markup at the end. So
Yeah,
it's
the
the second one
second
from
to
the bottom.
last.
Okay.
Okay. So what I've done here is this a version of this was posted for the last meeting. It was the R5 something or other, but bunch of long name with it. And this I got some comments and have incorporated some of those and done a little bit of editing. So this is a sort of clean version with a few updates. First of all, some editorial things. The exception here that we've got at the beginning said you can do it, this according to the appendix, and we just kind of figured accept is not really needed here. So that was just kind of a update. We talked about removing that. That stuff has not changed. Here in this section here, oh, this is the mark. Is this the markup version I've got showing? It might be. Oh well. Okay. Let me. Sorry. Let me bring up the cleaner version again. Let me stop sharing. Make sure I've got the right version I want. Oh, okay. Yeah. It's. Let me get this size correctly and then reshare. Oh, that's not it. That one? That one. Okay. All right. Let's try this again. Okay, so what I'm showing here are the changes I've made are in the edits since the last version are in word track changes here. So in this this version, we realized that there is we had an extra restriction here that no longer applies. We originally, when the baseline was written, we were only allowing exterior stairs, etc. And so we got rid of that, and so we needed to get rid of the that part in the scope here. This exception here is basically what Marcus had put together before, except we part of the reorganization is that I'll go into in a sec here. Everything gets referred to this other section here in 102.3. So let's see. Okay. All right. So if you go then to what I've done in 102.3 is redo the whole section on fire resistance rated assemblies, fire protection features. The idea is that whenever the appendix calls for a fire resistance rated assembly, it didn't really say what standards you're supposed to use, how that all works. And so we've kind of consolidated that all into this 102.1 has that pointer to the IBC section 721. Those are the prescriptive fire resist rate assemblies that you can test them, or you can establish it by an analytical method. Then you have the continuity. This, I think, was in there before. It's just been moved to this section here. You have to extend to the exterior wall, be tight against it, and go from foundation to the underside of the roof for sheathing. We talked about this at one point, supporting construction. If you've got a fire resistance rated floor assembly, it's got to be supported by construction with the same fire resistance rating. This is new. This whole section is new on opening protectives. Basically, we're saying you need to have, again, if you have a fire rated door, there was nothing in the draft that we had that talked about, okay, how do you determine that opening protective rating and things like that. So anytime there's the appendix references what's called, these opening protectives and smoke and draft control assemblies, you go to this section and it says, okay, you got it. They comply with one of these standards, and they have to be labeled. And labeled is a defined term in the IRC. So we figure that's good enough. It basically says you got to have some information about what this thing is, and for your like your fire rated doors and things like that, it'll have the rating and some other information on there. Similarly, with your smoke and draft control assemblies, smoke and draft control assemblies are going to be used in corridors. That's why we have them here, and so they have to be tested and labeled, tested in accordance with this UL standards, and they have to also be labeled. And essentially, this shows that there's a smoke rating on it. The label does. Then we have this section on dwelling unit and common use area separations. This is kind of combines what we had before, where we had a section on the dwelling unit separations, but then and then Marcus's amendment or proposed amendment earlier kind of said what was required for the common space. So I've moved all of that kind of combined into this one section here. We say your dwelling units have to be separated from each other with a 1 hour fire resistance rating. That's your walls and floor ceilings. Your common use areas have to be separated from other portions of the building. Similarly, with your 1 hour fire resistance rating. If you have any openings, then you can't have openings in the wall and floor ceiling between dwelling units. You don't want them in the walls. We say you can't have duct and air transfer openings between dwelling units. But we're saying that your openings separating the in-wall separating dwelling units from the means of egress, there's a pointer to the means of egress section. That's just XX103. Your openings and walls for your common use areas you have to have opening protectives with a minimum protection fire protection rating of 1 hour. That's just to say, that's going to be, we talked about kind of wrapping your common areas with full 1 hour. So that's what this is about. If there are any penetrations, you go to the IRC already has a section, so this is just a pointer to that. But there are some special requirements for interior exit stairways and floor ceiling assemblies in the means of egress section. So there's a pointer to that as well.
Hey, John, I have a code writing question
Yes.
on the one above on openings.
Yes.
Is it all right to have like a paragraph? You have
Yeah.
three
Yeah.
paragraph. Okay, all right. I was thinking everything else seems to be numbered, but when you have a different.
No, there's lots of places with paragraphs. If you want a bullet list, numbered bullet list, we can do that. But
Bring tomorrow.
Hey, John, would the openings in walls and the openings in the common use areas, would those be exceptions to the prohibition on openings period to common use areas?
let's see.
Would that be exception 1 and exception 2 to 102.3.1?
102.3.1.
So that's the
So
code.
this is about from dwelling units to common use areas only. So we're not going to allow you to open your dwelling unit into the common use area, but you are allowed to have openings in the separation from the dwelling units to the means of egress, and similarly, you can have an opening in the wall separating the common use area from the means of egress. So they are separate. They're not really exceptions because this one only talks about
dwelling units
to the common use.
Is common use area a common term or a defined term in either the IRC or IBC?
No, I don't. Well, I don't remember. I think we discussed that earlier when we talked about that with Marcus's.
I guess I wouldn't want to have someone who's looking at this code saying, but the exits are common. Therefore,
we do have this one here. That was what Marcus's proposal was that we discussed a few meetings ago.
Okay.
No, certainly not the intent to. Yeah, right. I understand what you're saying. That's why I think that's another reason for saying you can have here openings and walls separating common use areas from the means of egress. This would be you're not going to be separating the means of egress from the means of egress. So I think common use areas. I think part of the discussion, as I recall, was that the definition may have included means of egress for common use areas, and I think we tried to clarify that with that, Marcus's amendment earlier.
John, in the the exception that you had up above, common use is dashed, is hyphenated. I'm not sure of the proper.
Oh, that I don't know.
Correct.
Common use is defined in the code.
Which code, Ken? This is the IRC.
Well, it's in the fire and building code.
Okay, let me look in the IRC. I mean, okay, I guess that again that kind of came up in the discussion with the earlier amendment there. Is it hyphenated? We can certainly go back and make sure we're consistent on that. But let me.
And I would rather not. We can fine tune that. I just noticed it. So let's go ahead and continue on. I think, and we can figure out if it's defined number one and.
It is not in the IRC, the base IRC. Okay.
That's not.
Let's see. Okay, where are we? Okay, so we now have this. We've done this section on dwelling unit and common use area separations. We have the section that says, you got to sprinkler the building. We have the requirements for portable fire extinguishers, fire department access and water supply, and fire separation distances. So it's all been grouped into this section 102. Then we start off with the means of egress. And this has been, depending if you looked at the document from before, and this is kind of goes with the figures that we kind of introduced in the meeting a couple of meetings ago. So basically, we start with saying, okay, you got to be provided with at least one means of egress. We're assuming that we're not assuming we're gonna be requiring two means of egress in any of these. They're going to be small enough that you shouldn't need two. And we also, to be consistent with the building code, we're saying, look, if you get a maximum of 40 dwelling units on each story. Again, these are only up to 6 plexes, so I don't think that's a big hardship. I don't see anybody trying to do nothing on the first floor and getting all 6 on the second floor. So I don't think it's going to be a major issue, but we just want to be clear. And again, this would correspond with what's allowed in the IBC. I have a potential user note here. If we want to include those figures that we went over that other meeting, I just got a user note saying they're provide to illustrate examples. They're in for, be clear they're for information only and don't supersede requirements in the text. So it's kind of, the disclaimer there. They're there for information only. Okay, and I guess we need to decide if we're going to include those figures or not. And I can bring those up if we want to look at them again. If we don't include the figures, then the user note goes away. Means of egress, continuity. The idea is, I think, and we talked about this when we went over the concepts, is that you provide, a pathway from the most remote point in your building to the public way. Again, this is a little bit different from the IRC, which only gets you to the front door. We're saying, okay, we really do want to get you to the public way on these. You can have corridors, egress balconies, interior exit stairs, exterior exit stairs, exterior exit doors, or any combination of these elements. And that's kind of again, just for the people who are not used to working the building code, that's what this is intended to do. You kind of, okay, you can combine these in different ways. So you can't pass through other rooms or uses. So again, once you're in a corridor, you can't open it into a separate room. There's some ways you get out of through the lobby, and we've got some language about that later. And we say that the interior and exterior stairways, you're supposed to be continuous from the point of entry into the stair until you get to the exterior of the building. Oh, that's where this is about. We have this exception that you can extend it to an exterior exit door or the public way with what's called an exit passageway at the ground level. And it says that exit passageway can only be used for egress or access to dwelling units or the common uses. Common uses are facilities. And the exit passageway needs to be separated with 1 hour rated construction and opening 1 hour doors, basically. So even if you had a unit door opening into this exit passageway, it would have to be rated 1 hour. Okay, the next thing is that this is just a general principle that I think people kind of understand in the building code, but it's not. It's kind of stated in the building code, but again, if you're not used to dealing with that, we are saying here that once you enter a protected environment, you can't go to less protection. You can't put any obstructions in there unless there's any projections, handrails and things like that are allowed by the code. We're saying the minimum width of your means of egress of 36 inches. That's pretty standard. Your travel distance, I think we've talked about this before. We're not going to allow anything more than 125 feet. Shouldn't be an issue because you're measuring to from again your unit to an exit door or corridor or whatever.
Yep. Hey, John, this is Derek here.
Yes.
Going back to 103.1.2 width,
Yes.
36 meaning 36 inches being a minimum. I have
Yep.
had a couple projects where site constraint and a lot of different things, that 36 inches was all we had, but is there an exception we can put in there for the width of the handrail? Like an exception under there that says, hey, we're 36 inches wide, but the thickness of the handrail.
I think that gets covered by this one here.
Obstructions shall not be placed in the minimum width of egress except projections permitted by this code.
Which would cover your handrails.
Oh. Okay.
And
it didn't jump out to me as that
Yeah.
simple, or that obvious. Maybe I need to practice reading code a little better.
Well, the idea is that you would ordinarily go back to the IRC, and the IRC, the model code language, and they do allow, whatever it is, 3.5 inches or whatever it is for the handrail.
Yeah, okay, sounds good. Keep rolling. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, doors. We've added this whole section on doors. If you're going once you've left your dwelling, you're in your dwelling unit, then you open that door. All of those doors from that unit door till the time you leave the building have to meet these requirements. If they're required to have a fire protection rating and exterior exit doors, you got to comply with all of these. So you got to have your minimum 32 inches clear, and it tells you how to measure that. They have to be side hinge swinging. You can't do any of these sliding doors or things like that. These are, by the way, all out of the building code. You're not supposed to have to use a lot of force to open the door, and the building code limits up to 15 pounds. Once you set it in motion, you need, or once you've kind of unlatched it, then you're supposed to be able to get it in motion with 30-pound force, no more than. And then once you get it in motion, then it takes 15 pounds to keep it moving. That's so that you can't set those closers and things like that too high, and you're leaning up against them, you can't even open them, which happens. I've run into lots of doors like that. Let's see. They'll show the basic requirement. You got to have a floor landing on each side of the door, basically at the same elevation, and then there's a standard exception that allows you at exterior doors you can have a 7-inch step, provided the door doesn't swing over the landing. So as you swing the door open, you're not falling on your face because you're not expecting to step down. Landings at the doors. Let's see. You got to have minimum 3-foot width. And you can't, if your door is open at fully open dimension, you can't reduce the width by more than 7 inches. If you got a threshold, it can't be more than 1/2 inch above the finished floor. If you got a fire protection rating, doors required to have fire protection rating. They have to be self-closing and provided with a latch, basically, that will secure the door when it's closed. It's a pretty standard fire door language. Doors have to be readily openable from both sides without use of a key or special knowledge or effort. Again, that's standard code language. Basically, you don't have to figure out, how do I open up this door? Should be very obvious. And then stairway doors, you are allowed to lock them from the inside of the stair, where the only interior access to the dwelling units is from an exit stairway. And that's right out of the building code as well. Unlatching the door doesn't, you can't do more than one motion. So if you got a deadbolt, when you turn the handle, it should unlock the deadbolt as well. Like your good hotel doors, if you've been in one, you push down on the lever and everything opens up. And you can't have manual bolts on them. Means of egress illumination. I think this was in the previous version. Basically, you got to light it up. Yes, Marcus.
Sorry, just to clarify on doors. And so the reason why they added this kind of code language here is because we have the use of fire rated doors kind of in different spots, and I guess the IRC doesn't have language related to.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, these are standard exit doors. Yeah, and the again, the IRC doesn't picture common exits.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. Thanks.
Okay. Corridors. We have this section on corridors. Um, Basically, you as part of your means of egress, you can have a corridor and exterior exit balconies. Your corridors, same thing. You got to be 36 inches. Don't know if we need that one given the other one, but the previous one, but that's okay. Corridors are limited to 20 foot maximum in length. We're assuming again that there's not that there we're talking about a dead end corridor, so that's why the 20-foot length that would correspond to the length of your dead ends. Um, let's see. If you're supplying air to the corridors, there's this whole thing about making sure you're not pushing the smoke around. And so there's these requirements. Most of the time, I don't think this is going to be an issue, but it's in the building code. Sometimes people want to, just as a note, sometimes people put air into the corridor to make sure that, cooking smells and things like that don't waft from unit to unit. So they'll pressurize the corridor a little bit or make sure there's some flow through. Yes, Rich.
Corridors are limited to 20 feet length. So if I come out of my unit, I can have 20 feet till I get to the stairwell door and enter my egress path. And if I come out of that stair and go into another exit corridor before I discharge from the building, is that corridor also limited to 20 feet?
Okay. First of all, you wouldn't be in a corridor once you're in a stair. You would be that would be reducing protection. So you would go from your corridor to a stair to that exit passageway that we talked about earlier. And that passageway would be rated a full 1 hour, and no, it would not be limited in length.
Yeah. Thank you.
Let's see, corridor protection. There was some discussion in the last meeting about whether you go to minutes or hours. I opted for hours because the codes are inconsistent. But the table I was working with talked about hourly rating. So I went with hours. So let's see, your corridor walls have to have a minimum fire resistance rating of half an hour. That's basically half-inch gyp. We don't think there are going to be too many people who do that, given that your units are supposed to be 1 hour, and that'll require 5/8, but you could do it. Let's see. Openings are protected by the smoke and draft control assemblies with a 1/3 hour based 20-minute fire protection rating. Again, that's standard for corridors. The idea is to provide I should say smoke seal, but some smoke protection for the corridor. So if the fire's in the unit, your smoke is supposed to be, you're trying to contain the smoke inside the unit where the fire is. If you got exterior walls in the corridor, so your corridor is up against an exterior wall, you don't have to rate it, as long as you've got a fire separation distance more than 10 feet. So if you don't want a fire next door, entering the building through that unprotected section, and it protects the corridor. Egress balconies. I don't know how many of these we'll see, but it's allowed. You can have, but this is again very similar to a corridor. You have to have separation from the interior of the building, pretty much as required, the same as required for corridors. There is, if you're going to call it an exterior exit balcony, there's some requirements for the size of the openings. It's got to be a minimum 50% open, and there's this lovely language in there that talks about the area above the guards need to be constructed to minimize accumulation of smoke. So the idea is that there's not this big overhang at the edge of the building that will hold the smoke in. Yeah. But that's language straight out of the building code. Location, your exterior exit balconies, again, they're going to have this wide open face. So they have to be a minimum of 10 foot away from adjacent lot lines and other buildings on the same lot. We got rid of this other portions of the building because that didn't really apply in this situation. And that, I know a lot of people get confused about that. And then this last sentence here kind of corresponds with number 2 there, so we're getting rid of that too. Exit stairways. Once you get to the stairways, we're first of all saying that you can't have winders, spirals, alternating treads, ship ladders, or ladders. That's those are too steep and they're not really made for shared egress, means of egress. So we talked about this, I think in a meeting a while ago. We talked about, okay, we're going to go to the standard IBC tread height and depth. So you're going to go to 7 and 11, 7-inch rise, 11-inch run. Stairway landings, very similar to doors. You got to have a landing. It's got to be less than 3. It's got to be at least 3 feet of depth and width. There's this thing that says if you got an exterior stairway, you got to design. You want to make sure that you're not puddling water on the walking surfaces. So you give them some minimum slope. Openings. One of the key things that openings in the stairways. Now, if you have unprotected exterior openings, you can have those. But basically, anything into these stairs is limited to those necessary for egress from dwelling units, openings from egress from common use spaces, and egress from the enclosure. So those are the only, you're not supposed to have any other doors or openings into these stairways. Exterior walls. Basically, we're saying this is that, I think we talked about it when we talked about the diagrams. This is the language that says if you've got, excuse me, an unprotected opening into the stair, if you got a wall nearby and it's less than 180 degrees, you got to protect either got to protect the wall and openings there, or you protect the opening to the stair. And we can go back to the diagrams and if people need a refresher on that one. Let's see. Interior exit stairways are a little bit different. This is where we say you got to have a 1 hour rating for your walls, and your openings are also not less than 1 hour. And by the way, this is one place I think we talked about. We're not going to have interior ramps. We're assuming we're not going to have interior ramps as part of this. So we're deleting places, and I think I just missed this earlier. We're saying elevators, you can't open them into the interior exit stairways and ramps. Those are supposed to be highly protected, and elevators are made for nice smoke chimneys. So we're not allowing them to open into your stairs. This is I kind of mentioned this earlier when we were in the penetration section. There's some special allowances for penetrations when you get to interior exit stairways. This is again straight out of the building code. You can put penetrations into or through interior exit stairways for these systems, your fire protection system, security. They allow you some electrical raceways. Structural elements can go in there. Yeah, yeah, I think those are the main pieces that are allowed to go in there. And you can't, if you've got a membrane penetration, so through penetration goes through both membranes of your wall, so both layers of your protection there. A membrane penetration only goes through one, and you're allowed to penetrate that on the outside of an interior exit stairway. And then you just got to protect them. And we reference the code, the IRC section that talks about that. Yes, Rich.
Hey, John, yeah, sorry to interrupt you, but going back up to that elevators opening into interior exit stairways and ramps, I read that to mean interior ramps. Is that how you read that?
Oh, yeah, we should probably get rid of that, right?
Yeah.
Because we're not going to have that. Okay.
Yeah, again, sorry to interrupt you.
No, good. All right. Let's see. How do I want to do this? Okay, since I'm going to, well, I'll make myself a note. This is 103.4.1. Delete. And
I'll make one. I'll make a note too, John.
okay. Thanks, Rich. That's what you get for cutting and pasting. Okay. Let's see. Enclosures under interior stairways. You can have an enclosed space under there. It's got to be protected by 1 hour rated construction, and you can't access that enclosed space from within the stairway enclosure. So a lot of people use that space for storage, a little storage closet or something like that. And as long as it doesn't open into the stairway itself, so you have to access it from outside the stairway, then you're allowed to do this. Excuse me. Exterior exit stairways, they have an open side, and there's some requirements for how big that opening has to be. It's basically 35 square feet and not less than 42 inches above the floor level. One thing I just noting in here for the code folks, IBC interestingly does not have that same requirement for accumulating smoke that you have, excuse me, as exterior exit balconies. So I didn't include anything in here, but I think that's kind of an oversight on the building codes part. There really should be something that says you configure again the opening so it doesn't accumulate smoke, but not there. Side yards, if you've got an exterior exit stairway, you got to be either yard, court, or public way, and you can have 3 sides basically closed or enclosed on the exterior stair. Exterior exit stairway location, you got to be 10 feet away from adjacent lot lines and other buildings on the same lot unless you've got protected openings based on your fire separation distance. Again, that's to protect the stair from fires in other buildings, especially since this is their only exit. Construction of the exterior stairs, you have 1 hour walls and 3/4 hour doors on your exterior stairs. And then similarly, this section here is about protecting those unprotected openings to the exterior stair. You can have enclosures under the exterior stair, and as long as you encase it in 1 hour construction. Let's see. Oh, and then I've added this section on ramps. The idea being, again, remember we said earlier we want to get you to the public way. So what I say is once you get to an exterior exit door, you're going to have ramps and probably stairs. The stairs are covered earlier. Your rise and run and things like that. We don't have anything on ramps. So we've got some requirements pulled out of the building code for ramps. We say, okay, you can't be steeper than 1 and 12. You can't have a big cross slope. You got to basically your 1/4 inch and 12 cross slope. You can't have for each run. You can't have a rise more than 30 inches. This is more of an accessibility issue, but that's the way it's kind of been mainstreamed into the building code. Your ramps can't be less than 36, but if it does get to be part of an accessible route, it can't be less than 48 inches in width. And that's again right out of A117, I believe. Ramps got to have a landing, top and bottom of each ramp, points of turning, all these other places. The ramp landings are 60 inches length and width, and they got to be designed so that you're not going to, puddle water on them and make it slippery. So that's all there is in the means of egress section. For the purposes of this, I just struck out the part on EV charging infrastructure because that's going to be Patrick's proposal. We just plop it in this section here. We have the section on accessibility. I think we've talked about that before. Then we talked about elevators. None of this has changed. And then we're prohibiting habitable attics. And we have some structural provisions that we discussed in the last meeting. Basically, if you're in size of design category D2 and you're more than 2 stories, you got to get a registered design professional. And that is it for the reorganization and the means of egress. So the main thing about the reorganization, just to go back to reiterate, the idea was to put all the stuff having to do with rated doors and rated walls into this section 102 here. So your fire resistance rated assemblies and your opening protectors are all covered here. Anytime you have one of those, you go back to this section to figure out what standards you're meeting and how you label them. I know that was a lot, but open to questions. The PDFs that got posted for today's meeting, they got posted sometime today. Do not have these comments in the margin here. I can certainly, I think I don't know, Dustin, if you're going to post the Word versions of these. But they'll have the comments again, just a little bit of commentary on what's going on here.
John, excuse me, can you remind me why we felt it was important to specify all of the criteria where we get out to the public way, the definition of ramps, etc.?
Because we are saying that the means of egress is supposed to go out to the public way, unlike the IRC, which only gets you to the front door.
And we're saying that because when you have 6 units, I guess I'm asking the question, why do we need to go above and beyond the residential code?
I think again, this is just to make sure you have a safe pathway to the public way. I would not, for instance, I've seen houses built on, where the street level is maybe 8 feet below the front yard of a house, and there's a set of stairs that go down from the front yard down to the sidewalk.
Yeah.
I, for instance, would not want to see a very steep set of stairs to get you to the public way there. I think that would be very unsafe.
Richard, go ahead.
Yeah, Roger, I also think it's because we're introducing the concept of a shared means of egress from buildings now. So
Okay.
I think it's important to keep consistent with the IBC in that respect, and kind of model this after what's being done in that.
Okay. Well, I am starting to think about putting together a summary of the enhancements again. So again, I'm hopefully I will have that draft and that I can present at the next meeting. But okay. Other questions for John? Micah.
Thanks. I guess it's really not a question for John, but more or less for you, Roger. On that enhancement comment, are you considering that the means of egress of the right of way is an enhancement for the residential code, or is it an enhancement for the 6 units? Because currently that would be the requirement for 6 units built out of the IBC. So that just a curiosity question and probably not relevant overall, but thanks.
Yeah, it isn't, Michael, it isn't necessarily, what it is when I present it to the BFRW, the council, to summarize in general, these are the things that we are doing above and beyond the residential code to accommodate the 6 units. So it's not related to and so the easy answer is we've, the residential code may, and this is why I want to get the wording right, but allows for duplexes. It doesn't anticipate having shared exit corridors, that kind of thing. And so we had to introduce that information from the building code. So it's simple like that, and it's really meant for me I want to be prepared to have a good summary when I'm presenting the general concept to council, for instance, without going through, I'm not going to read through every item, but I want to be able to summarize for people the changes we've included.
I appreciate that. It was just a curiosity question. It sounds like you're going to be presenting in a way that we're enhancing something over the residential code. I'm hoping you'll also show it as we're providing breaks or reducing barriers over what's required in the current standard for this type of structure, which is the building code. So I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Seems like,
Well,
it might be better to talk about the breaks and things we're offering that are less restrictive or equally
sure.
as restrictive for the current 6 units than it would be that, hey, we're going above and beyond the residential code, but technically we're not because
Yeah.
these aren't in the residential code currently. Thanks.
Okay. Good point, Micah. And again, my intent will be to draft that up and I'll everybody can review it and comment on it at our next meeting. So, okay. Anything else?
Roger, I would like a little bit of guidance as to whether we think we want to include those figures.
Yes.
Because again, that'll somewhat affect the language here, but also, you know, putting those into the appendix, I need to obviously, well, I think Dustin may have the figures, but still they need to get planted in here.
I guess I'm curious if I'm not used to, is there any when do we include figures?
Usually in the IRC, they actually fully illustrate the code requirements.
Okay.
They have them all lots of them because the figure that a lot of the people who use the code aren't going to read the language. They're going to go to the figures, and that makes things a little easier. So again, that was actually part of the point of even producing these figures, because we are guessing that a lot of the builders that are getting into this realm are not going to be used to the standard. If you're used to building apartment buildings, then yeah, you know all this stuff.
Okay.
But the idea being that this will help hopefully reduce some of the questions.
Yeah. All right, I'll offer my opinion. I know when you had the illustrations, it was very, very helpful for me to understand. So I kind of like the idea of doing that. Ken?
Hey, John, I was just wondering, and I ran through this quickly, do you have headroom in here in the corridors and stairs?
It's whatever is in the IRC would govern.
Okay.
Which I believe they do have. I will go back
No,
and look.
they do have it for stairways, but since there's not corridors in the IRC, I was just wondering if you wanted to include the headroom.
We could if we think that's important. It'd be what, 7 foot?
I think it'd still be the 80 inches, I think.
7'6". Yeah, the problem is that ends up driving a lot of sort of floor heights. But yeah.
I know. Just wondering.
Certainly open to input on that. It's not difficult to do. And I don't know if that's something maybe Dustin adds to the issues list as a new item.
Why don't we do that? I mean, my hope is that we are able to post everything that we've kind of decided today, which is going to be a pretty complete. We go through the issues list, and if we have one that we've added, and people can think about it, and then we can talk about it at the next meeting. Does that sound like a plan, Dustin?
That sounds good. And so we want to add the use of the figures to our topic list?
Number one and number two would be minimum headroom in the corridor.
Gotcha.
So yeah, let's everybody think about that. And as you're reviewing the full text that comes out of the meeting today, just consider those two things. Again, I kind of like the idea of the illustrations. Marcus, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I like the idea of illustrations too. I just wanted to check if the illustrations are linked and posted on maybe one of the previous meetings or access, because I don't think I've seen the illustrations myself.
They have not been, as far as I know. We went over them in a meeting a couple meetings ago, and I believe you weren't there.
Okay.
We can
So I
certainly
can
do
go
that.
back and look at the recording of one of the of a meeting then. Okay.
Well, if we're going to include it in the code or in the appendix, then they should get posted. So
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna suggest, Dustin, that what we post after the meeting today include those.
Okay.
You can leave it as a discussion item, but I haven't heard anybody say we shouldn't. I kind of like the idea that we do, so let's include those, and then everybody can be looking at it with the illustrations included. Okay?
Okay.
Do we want to, so I was then going to go back through the issues list and just double check and make sure that we've caught everything. Do we want to take a break till 2:30? And we'll pick up with the issues log, and then we will go jump into Patrick's EV. Okay? So let's take a break until 2:30.
Yep. Dustin, real quickly, before you post the figures, I actually have to go through and add figure numbers to them.
Okay. And so when you get those, can you forward them to me?
Yes, I will.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Dustin, I'm assuming you're there. Can you bring up the topic summary? Multiplex. I did look at all of the egress things. I guess we can kind of walk through them if you want, but what I did notice is the column that is the baseline document location has not been updated for John's reconfiguring.
Yeah, it'll need to be updated for that.
So I don't know that you need to do it as we speak here, but before it gets posted, have to go through and make sure that we're referencing which section.
So, as far as the reorganization goes, are we thinking we want to take a motion to accept that reorganization or have them posted side by side?
I actually will suggest that we make a motion to accept the reorganization. In fact, I guess I will call for that motion.
So moved, John.
Thanks, John. Do I have a second?
Second, Richard.
Thanks, Richard. Is there any additional discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, and I jumped the gun too soon. Should we also make a motion to include the illustrations?
Sure, I'll make that motion.
Okay,
John.
thanks, John.
I'll
Second.
second.
I think Derek seconded it, I think. Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed?
Roger, and if I may interject, if people think there are other figures than the ones that I've just I just sent them off to Dustin before we
Okay.
start up again. If people want other figures, I can certainly try to produce them. Be helpful if
Okay.
whatever we think is helpful.
Well, again, I think I know that they were very helpful for me, but I think everybody looking through it after the meeting today, if we post the update and are able to read through the whole thing with the illustrations and come back to our next meeting with any comments, and certainly that would be if you think that we need additional ones. Okay. So the headroom in the corridor, we will leave. Use of figures, we've got. So now we're down to the EV. Patrick, are you on board and do you want to?
I'm ready.
Do you want to share or you want Dustin to share?
Dustin can share.
Okay.
Okay. All right. It's looking better than the one I posted, Patrick.
Yeah, that's what I'm more familiar looking at. Except I use dark mode, but I won't hold that against you. Yeah, so thanks to Richard and Micah. I met with them. We were able to go into more detail about their feedback on the stuff. We mainly looked at the accessibility stuff, how to improve that language, and then there was also a couple of other changes that came up. So just scrolling through it first, Richard, we couldn't recall if we were allowing multiple multiplexes on the same site, so potentially having multiple multiplexes served by the same parking lot. So Richard was hoping to see a version of the requirements based off of the total number of parking spaces instead of dwelling units. So I created an option B. If you scroll down into the main, yeah. Wait, yeah, right here. So, or actually, I should say before that, I added in some language to make it clear that electrical vehicle charging infrastructure shall be permitted to be designed and installed so that EVSE or future EVSE can serve multiple adjacent spaces with multiple output connections. That was something that Micah brought up. And then for option, so the table you're familiar with before, that's now option A, and then option A is based off of the dwelling units, assuming a 1-to-1 ratio of parking spaces to dwelling units. Option B now just bases it off however many parking spaces there are. It is a little bit more complicated because I calculated the EV capable. It's basically capping it at no more than 50% of automobile parking spaces will be for both EV ready and EV capable. So you have to calculate the total and then subtract EV ready to get how many EV capable spaces you have to put in. So the tag can decide whether or not you want to go with option B or option A. And then going down into the accessibility part. So what Micah brought before was the language that I had kind of made it seem like it could apply accessibility parking requirements even when those might not have to occur. And so we just changed it simply to where accessible parking spaces are required. So if you have to put in accessible parking spaces, then there's this section will apply into how many you have to provide with EV charging infrastructure. So the option A was originally, it's a very small number of spaces we're providing, and the intent is that those are shared among all the tenants. So I had the requirements for accessible EV parking spaces be separate from the main requirements. Whereas in the IBC, you can count a certain number of accessible spaces with some EV charging infrastructure towards the overall requirements. So if the tag goes with option B to have it based off total parking spaces, I recommend allowing the ones serving accessible parking spaces to count towards the main requirements. So there's those two options in there. And then just clarifying, again, making it very clear that electrical vehicle charging infrastructure you put in can serve accessible, or one serving accessible parking spaces can also serve adjacent parking spaces that are not accessible. And those are the extent of the changes. I added in a table in the explanation section so that you can compare the resulting number of spaces. So EV ready stays consistent across both options. For EV capable, option A, and then EV capable, option B. The numbers for the EV capable would go up, especially as the number of parking spaces go up. So, is there any questions? Richard.
Hey, Patrick, yeah, I know we discussed this at our meeting. The idea, well, the question of who determines the number of actual parking spaces currently, right? And just wondering if we, if you specify some criteria for determining parking spaces, how is that going to differ from the current process, which is, in my mind, typically determined by planning department, right? When we do a plan review, we just see the number of spaces provided, but it's determined by others. Sounds like, what we're talking about making that determination here. And I'm just wondering if others have had a chance to, like, for instance, the planning department has had a chance to look at that and weigh in. And then, well, I'll stick there. I lost my train of thought on the other thing I was going to bring up. I'm sure it'll come to me.
I can speak up here.
All right, go ahead, Derek.
Yeah, manufacturer and developer. In my experience, if the planning department has a code that is codified, like something like this, they will often refer to that, refer and defer. Yeah.
Darren.
So this is secondhand from our planning people, but I'm told that with state law now, basically superseding all local planning ordinances, there is no parking requirements whatsoever in our city. That's what they're telling developers. So anyway, that's what I'm told.
Okay, Marcus.
Just to that last point, yeah, there'll be changes that eliminate the parking minimum. That doesn't mean that parking won't go in. And so you'll still have the kind of counting numbers of if parking goes in and is chosen. Patrick, if you could scroll up, I like option A for how you're counting them in contrast to B, just because I think at this small scale, I think just having the number of spaces is simpler than trying to calculate a percentage, especially since we had the discussion about how the percentages don't always really line up. Like, one space for a threeplex is already 33%. And you're saying, the minimum is 20% type of thing. And so there's kind of this mismatch already there. I will say, to the point that was brought up in terms of how many are on a site and how that might complicate that table, because it's really pointing to the assumption of like one multiplex on a site. And I think we did say that you can do multiple multiplexes on a site as long as they meet the separation requirements that were in that that are in the IRC based off of the table. So maybe that's electrical vehicle charging infrastructure per multiplex, I guess, is maybe a way of like keeping kind of the framework of option A, but not getting confused or not having a confusion when there's like multiple multiplexes on a lot. And the dwelling units don't match up type of thing. Just a thought there.
Thanks, Marcus. And before I move on, I think it's important to confirm. I understood what Marcus said as well. We are silent on whether you can have the number of different multiplexes you could have on a site. I believe. Dustin, is that in our summary list?
Let's see.
Dwelling unit? Oh no, that's dwelling unit.
Kind of the closest thing is the number allowed to be attached together.
And fire separation buildings per IRC, I see.
I'm now thinking though that even if you had multiple per site, they'd probably be permitted separately. So you'd have a separate building permit per building. And so the EV charging stuff should probably apply per building inherently.
Per building, okay. All right. I think
if they treat it like a single family site development with 50 units, you have 50 building permits. So
okay. Thank you. Richard?
So Roger, am I hearing what you're saying? Are you talking about maybe staying silent on the number of buildings allowed on a site, or are we going to determine that?
I believe that that's what we currently are silent on it.
Because
and the building separation somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's criteria in the IRC for building separation.
Okay, a couple of things on that. I mean, if I'm looking at this table, to me, it could get a little confusing if you're looking at this table. And I mean, I'm assuming there's nothing stopping somebody from providing one overall parking site or parking lot to serve multiple buildings. And that just seems logical to me. And if that were the case, how you would then, I think people could get confused on how to apply this table to that situation. And then the other thing is just keep in mind that once we open that door to multiple buildings on a site, then you're opening yourself up to type A unit requirements, which is fine. I mean, we're already pointing, and I'm talking about accessibility. I'm switching gears a little bit. That's fine because we already are correctly pointing to R2 occupancy requirements for accessibility, but it's just something to, I mean, if we're talking about staying silent and we just have to understand that means we are still open to type A requirements.
Okay. And I think, Richard, and again, people can correct me if I'm wrong, but we decided to not address it because that would be covered in the IRC, I think.
Yeah, like I said, we're already pointing to it. We're already getting there. It's just a matter of applying that correctly.
Yeah. Okay. John?
If I'm reading this right, option A is saying that if you have, for example, 3 dwelling units, you need to have 1 EV ready space. I'm wondering if that's the intent, or if we should just say it's based on the number of provided spaces, which seems like option B is saying, so in a jurisdiction where no parking is required, we don't want this code to say you have to provide an accessible parking space when none would otherwise be required.
Yeah, the very beginning of the code section says it applies to only where on-site parking is provided. And that's consistent with the state amendment for the IBC.
And you're looking there. Is there something, that we can add in that 104.2 that addresses multiple buildings on a site? Maybe, I don't know. John, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, it kind of, how many of these you put on a site kind of depends. We've done things like in Seattle, Holly Park and place like that where it's one huge big development site with a bunch of buildings on it of various sizes. So I don't know if you want to preclude that. I think it's okay to have multiple on a site as long as you got and Roger, you are correct that we do say that as long as you provide the fire separation distances between the buildings, you can have more than one, and we're just silent on how many. But I think if you want to say that option A is per building, then I think it would help to probably say that somewhere in the text in 104.2 that you apply that table for each multiplex building on the site. If that's where you want to go, or if you want to go the option B, which may have fewer required. I don't know. I don't know how it all works out, but
My only challenge with that, John, is if you have 10 on a site, you have 10 three-dwelling units, you're going to have 33 units, and you're going to have 11 EV-ready spaces.
yeah, I mean that's what this would say. Yeah, that's what this would say.
And I am with Richard. I think that we somehow have to accommodate that. If somebody's going to do a parking lot with 2 or 3 or 4 of these multiplex buildings, we don't want to overburden the EV charging either. That's my opinion.
So, I mean, an option might be to say that to have both tables in, quite frankly, and say if you're doing one building, you go, you can use the first table, and if you're doing more than one building, then look at the second table. I don't know. I mean, I haven't thought that one through either, but that might help the numbers.
What do you think about that, Patrick?
I'm trying to do math in my head, which is always dangerous. I'm not sure. I recognize, I guess there's a possibility you could have like up to 10 per site, but I feel like that's gonna be a pretty niche kind of situation. I don't see that. I don't foresee that being like a huge likelihood.
Well, I guess 2 other comments. Number one, we could leave it as option A and kind of be silent, and that might come up in public comment. I guess for those code officials, would there be a way, if I'm a developer and I want to do the 10 building scenario with 1 parking lot, and I don't want to do 33 or 11 parking spaces, is there something in the code for me to say, to get a code exception? A path?
If I were still a building official, I would say no, we given this language, but
Yeah.
yeah, other building officials may interpret it differently or try to find some wiggle room somewhere else. But I think this would be a pretty hard one to say, just close your eyes and say, no, you don't have to do it.
Mhm. Micah?
I'll jump on that with John. I would agree that there would be no path to waive that. On another comment, though, I like option B a lot, but I have or like option B for a different reason, and even it's not all option B. I want us to question whether or not we want to provide EV capable spaces. And I got some reasoning for that. And I know Patrick and I kind of went back and forth on this, and I don't know if we want to get into that now, but it kind of lends to this whole table here in EV capable and the requirements. But per the language, we would not be providing any type of infrastructure other than a raceway for EV capable parking spaces. you're not providing electrical system service or on-site distribution, capacity to transformers, anything like that is not required for EV capable, just a raceway. So my question is what benefit does that gain you if you can't or don't have the infrastructure in place to service that EV capable space? And if you want to get kind of more into the weeds on that, I can and go through the sections to discuss that. But that may be an option, is to eliminate the EV capable altogether. Because again, per 1043 of this language, you don't have any means to service that now or in the future. So again, you're just putting in raceways for don't know what. But I'll pause there, and if we want to get into that part of it, but I like option B, and again, we just need to evaluate whether or not we're going to even, or whether the group will vote to provide EV capable, because again, I'll throw that out there. That's not even part of the legislation. The 20% is, and I think Patrick's on a good path for that. Thanks.
Micah, can I confirm you're suggesting table B, but make it as parking spaces provided to get over that issue if none are required?
Correct.
Okay. Darren.
I was just thinking there might be only one advantage to that, the raceway, or let's say conduit. If there's a post-tension deck or there's fire ratings, it's already there. You don't have to make it through the building retroactively. That's my only thing on that. Thanks.
I would suggest, Darren, that if that's the case, you're building this out of the IBC, not out of the IRC. Maybe. I don't know. Go ahead, Micah.
I'll throw my hand up. I would say you can build up a post tension out of the IRC we just designed. I would agree with you on that, Darren, that the raceway would be beneficial in that instance, but there's no requirement for you to put in the electrical equipment to supply that raceway. If you go to 1043 in this proposal, and maybe we're not there again, I might be jumping the gun. The electrical room is all that's required. The electrical room or areas for dedicated electrical equipment. You're not required to put that electrical equipment in. The electrical service on the next item, if you go to the next paragraph, you see it there. Right there, Dustin. The electrical service, electrical system, including on-site, shall have sufficient capacity only for the EV ready. So I'm not sure how you're going to drive conduit for the electrical service through the building to a raceway that you put in for that whole benefit. Again, I think we just need to reevaluate whether or not we're even going to provide or should provide EV capable without providing the electrical equipment and distribution for it. John,
go ahead.
Yeah, I'm somewhat in agreement with Mike on that. And it seems to me that the case of having a PT slab in these dinky little buildings is going to be very, very rare. It's only going to be if you're on, liquefaction soils, or I don't know what it would be. It'd have to be it'd only be your slab on grade that would be, post tensioned. And gosh, I don't, we've made a lot of other assumptions as we've gone through this. We're assuming wood frame, we're assuming a whole bunch of other things. Only one stair. It seems to me that we wouldn't be, we should. I just can't imagine there being a PT slab in these. But yeah, but I also agree with just want to say I agree with Micah that it doesn't seem to do a whole lot, to run a conduit out there. And if we were all to agree with that, that would simplify that. You wouldn't need a table. You would just put that in the text to say you need 20% shall be whatever it is EV ready, and leave it at that. Basically you're deleting that second column in the table.
I will, just my experience, John, in my 35 years of practicing structural engineering in the Seattle area, I have never used a post-tension slab on grade in the Seattle area. I've done it in Texas where there's expansive soils, but there's always some other way that we've dealt with liquefaction. So
Yeah.
I know that some people do it and it's an option, but it's pretty rare.
Yeah.
So,
And we don't have expansive soils up here, right? So
correct. Up here, it would only be the liquefaction that would drive you to think about that. So, um, okay.
I'll throw out there just maybe in other parts of the state if they had high water table, you may look at a post tension. That's the only other time I've run into it, but that's pretty rare. In flat areas, yeah, here in the mountains, not so much, but
Yeah.
not that we're going to run into it very much anyway.
Yeah. All right. I will add one other comment, and I just, if we're heading down the path of option B, it might solve this, but just thinking about, we've talked about builders, the people that are going to use these are builders that are used to working out of the IRC and not necessarily getting into the language of the code. That was why I kind of liked having the table. It's pretty straightforward. It's simple. We're doing the math for them, but if we go to option B and get rid of the capable spaces, maybe that goes, that concern is moot. John?
well, if you want to keep the table, I mean, I understand, it makes doing the math for them may be simpler. Maybe you go up to the 6 and say if you got more than 6 on the site, you got to go to the calculation. I mean, that would kind of solve, you would just add another line in the table, say more than 6, 20% of whatever,
But then you're getting whether the question of whether we're basing it on dwelling units or parking spaces provided.
Right. Oh, true. Okay. Well, then you would say 20% of the parking spaces provided. You'd say something like that in the table.
Richard?
Yeah, I'm in favor of some form of option B. I don't think the calculation we're talking about is all that difficult. It's pretty straightforward.
Okay. Marcus?
Yeah, I guess the only thing that I just want to flag or that's coming up for me is this is setting a minimum. And so if you say the number of EV ready spaces and it's tied to parking spaces, you are setting potentially a higher minimum than you would if it's just tied to dwelling units, for example. So if somebody chooses to put in 12 spaces because that works in their market to do that, you are setting a higher minimum than if you had just said, you need to do 1 or 2 EV ready spaces for a 6-unit building type of thing, right? So that's just something to kind of think through, where the percentages, if it's based off of the spaces, is variable, and therefore, because it's variable, it can probably be a higher minimum of EV ready spaces.
I would just comment, I did the math and I don't do math without my calculator, but 20% of 12 would be 2.4, so it would be 3 rather than 2 spaces. So it isn't that big of a leap, Marcus, if we did that. So Micah?
That's a great point, Marcus. I didn't think about that even though it's just adding one more, like Roger said. I didn't consider that, so thanks for that point. I would probably agree with Roger, though. Maybe that's not a bad thing to increase it by that one, especially if you eliminate the capable spaces and you go to the 20%. If you do have more parking spaces, it's really not a penalty because you would not, if you did away with the EV capable, then you're really not changing the number all that much. You just have to be providing one additional 40 amp space in your panel for that parking space that you would not have been providing. You already provided the raceway. Just a thought. I mean, I think it's almost a wash, and maybe that's what Roger was getting at.
John?
Yeah, I was just going to argue the converse of Marcus's point that, if you decided to provide fewer than 1 stall per unit, like you had a 6-unit building and you provided 2 parking stalls, this would require you to provide more or EV ready stalls than 20%.
I would like to go back also. Patrick and I were both very involved in the EV ready in the building code. So the proposal that's currently, I guess it's the BFRW version, which is for buildings built in the building code. So remember, we're in between this, residential code. It's basic. I mean, if you have a garage, or think you have to put something in the building code, there's EV. So spaces that have EV chargers, then there's EV ready, and then EV capable. We are not even requiring that they put in the charger in this case. We are basically saying it is EV ready spaces. They're, you're ready, you are prepared to plug in a charger with EV ready, but the charger itself is not there. So, and is that a reasonable, the word that comes to me is compromise between the building code and the residential code? I kind of think that it is, and I actually like getting rid of the EV capable and just doing the 20%. So,
I will say there is a lot of electrical vehicles do come with their own charging cables. The EVSE is actually inside the vehicle, and so they can plug directly into outlets. So there is a possibility that even with EV ready spaces, even though there's not what you think of a charging station, a lot of electrical vehicles can actually charge from that. And we're providing a pretty high amperage and voltage, so it's better than because you can plug it into like a 120 volt and charge at a very low level. That's a level 1. So this would be a level 2 level of charging. I also did some math. I did get I messed up the math on the EV ready. It does change between the two tables. When you get to the 12 parking spaces, it would go up to 3. Sometimes with 4 dwelling units, you could get up to 2 EV ready for option B. And then with the multiple sites, it does create a problem because if you had, let's say, just for the sake of easy math, there's 10 multiplex on the same site and they all have a shared parking lot with, let's say, 60 parking spaces. If you calculated it separately using the option A, you'd have to put in 20 EV ready, whereas if you just did 20% of 60 parking spaces, it would only be 12. So
can we just put in an exception that if you are doing a shared parking with multiple buildings, go to the IBC or something like that?
IBC does require EVSE spaces.
Right, but if you're in that, I mean, we're talking about the case where we're doing 10, then somehow giving people direction that if you get to that point, go to the IBC EV charging and figure it out that way.
Sorry, Roger, is that more than 10 spaces or more than 10 units? Maybe you said that.
I think he said if it was multiplexes.
Multiple 10 buildings, 10 multiplex buildings is what I was talking about. And then, rather than needing 12 EV ready spaces, you go to the building code and it may end up needing 4 or something. I don't know, 5. I don't know what the IBC criteria would be, but it would be less. The IBC criteria is really for a multifamily building where there's 10, 20, 30 units, then that's kind of what that table is set up for. Go
If you
ahead.
do go with option B, I think that solves the multi-site problem.
Well, except the 20%, is it per building, Patrick? That's the challenge. If it's per building,
Well, it would be per parking spaces. So if they have one shared lot, it's just based off the spaces. If they
okay,
have separate lots, then you calculate the lots separately.
okay. Micah?
I'm shaking my head. Yeah, that's a lot of thumbs up there. I agree with Patrick on that one. Yeah, it would be just whatever you're providing, 20% of whatever you're providing, and I also agree. I think Rich said it. I think that's pretty simple,
Yeah.
number, simple math, and I think it gets this proposal to be a little more simple as well. Especially if we got rid of the EV capable and just went with EV ready, and you've got the infrastructure in place, and it's you got the receptacle outlet, like Patrick said, the cars may already have the cable plugged right in, and you're done. So, great suggestions.
Okay. So a path forward, the edits that would be required for option B, I guess my suggestion is if we as a group agree, let's go with option B and get rid of the EV capable. Then there's some major editing that has to happen for this. But I think that would be proper for us to do that and have either Patrick do it or Dustin. And in the document that's posted for us to review, it would be option B without the EV capable.
I think all you'd have to do is you just approve all of the changes except for the option A stuff, and you delete the option A table, and then you just delete the column in the option B table.
Well, but there is definitions that you're adding, and
But those don't change between the options.
yeah, except if we're getting rid of the capable, we don't need a definition for EV capable.
Yeah.
So, and then there's something down below too. Well, 402.2, 104.2.2 is also EV capable parking spaces. So, I mean,
Point taken.
Dustin, are you running this?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So if we make an edit, let's just edit. I don't think it's that far. Well, I guess I don't want to be presumptuous here. Can we, all right, you're editing as we go. I guess what I would like to do is do we want to make a motion, have somebody make a motion to do option B without the EV capable?
So moved.
Okay.
Second, Richard.
Thanks, Richard. John, Richard. Are there any other comments people would like to have?
Just as Dustin is editing, since there's only one entry in the table, again, I don't think you need the table itself. I think you just insert that into the text somewhere.
Yeah, I agree.
There's also this, by the way, there's also reference to EV capable in the second paragraph of 104.2, I see. So go up where it says where shared on-site parking is provided, you would go shall be provided, or 20%, yeah, we'll have to figure out how to say it, but you would insert the 20% requirement in that sentence and get rid of the table.
Yeah. Okay. John, can we just make the motion basically allowing Dustin to make the appropriate edits?
Sure.
And then rather than do that whole thing online here, and then we can all review it at the next meeting. Micah, go ahead.
But since you're making the edits, we're going to make them at the next meeting under the accessible parking space table, it also references EV capable, so you'd have to modify that table or eliminate, decide if how many accessible you're going to provide there. Thanks.
Okay, thanks for pointing that out.
So the motion is for the concept and wording to be determined.
Yeah. Any other comments? All right, all those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? All right, that motion passes. Topic summary. What else do we've got here? Exterior porches. Micah, your hand's up. Is that new?
Yeah, it was. Before we jumped off of that, I don't know
Okay.
if we fully talked about the accessible infrastructure. Maybe I missed that. We did add a sentence in there, and Patrick, I don't know if you wanted to talk about that one, where it would allow the EV. It's just above the accessible table, Dustin, if you're going to it, where we added that the EV charging infrastructure could serve both an accessible space and an adjacent regular space and still count. I believe there was some discussion on whether or not we wanted to include that. I know previously it said it wouldn't count in your previous version, Patrick, and I don't know if you want to talk about that for a minute. But that was something Richard and I had discussed, I think, in the last meeting when this was brought up.
You might have missed that. I talked about that right at the beginning. So with option B, I added in because you're increasing the total number of having it count towards it. So
I did. I apologize.
no worries.
Thanks.
So Patrick, do we talk about accessible spaces or just address how the accessible spaces would interact with the EV?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
What drives you to do accessible spaces? It's not this.
No, I'm not an accessibility expert. I think Micah mentioned before, it's like when you go 4+ units, it triggers. And I'm not sure if that's in the IBC. Well, I know the IBC talks about it. Richard probably knows more, but like once it's triggered, wherever that is, then here's the amount you do.
Okay, Richard.
Yeah, if you in this case, if you have type B units, 4 more units on a site, and assuming they weren't multi-story units, then you'd be getting into parking spaces that would be serving accessible elements, right? And then I think the way we're doing this, you just go into 1106 to figure out the number of accessible spaces. And then this is based on the number of accessible parking spaces, right, Patrick?
Yeah, I did assume, I assumed that there wouldn't be more than 50. So if you do have 10 multiplexes on site, you might need 3 accessible spaces. But I think if you have 2 that are EV ready, that should be pretty sufficient.
Excuse me. So I guess Richard, I'm not sure if you answered my question. Does the IRC determine whether or not you have accessible spaces?
Yeah, Roger, it's because we're pointing to R2 occupancy equivalency in the IRC for these buildings. That gets you to the requirements of Chapter 11. And then once you follow Chapter 11, you'll get your accessible parking requirements, and then you can come back here and figure out what's required for EV accessible spaces.
Okay. And then Dustin, also just make sure, we did need to make sure we change the table to spaces provided. The provided word was not in the table, I don't think. 20% of all of those spaces right now. And again, if you're going to convert that into wording rather than a table, John, go ahead.
Yeah, just real quickly, with the document that we just approved for the kind of reorganization, the accessibility requirement gets triggered in section XX 105.
Okay,
That's what Rich was talking about, where we are saying you got to treat it like an R2.
okay,
Yeah, thanks, John.
thank you. Okay. Moving on. The two things that are still, well, didn't we add one up on top? I forgot. Now I'm getting confused myself. Exterior porches. I don't recall what this question was about.
I'm not really remembering super great myself, but are these allowed to have, balconies on the outside? I don't know. John, you got your hand up?
Yeah, I think that wasn't that Sherry Newbold asked about stacked balconies, and that one we haven't addressed here. Uh, I think we would leave that to my personal feeling would be to leave it to interpretation. But because the idea in certain jurisdictions that those actually become floor area, and if you stack up a bunch of balconies, they become floor area, and the openings around them, even though there's no windows or doors, whatever, those are considered to be openings. And then that then sets how close you can get to the property line. Some people treat them as projections, which allows you to get closer to the property line. So there's reasons for both. It's ill-defined in the base model codes. People disagree what's a projection versus floor area, and so I'll leave it at that. But I think Sherry's question is about that, how to treat them, and it's possible that she's asking for some to be put in there so that we get uniformity. I suspect that there's going to be disagreement across, different people and jurisdictions how they want to treat that.
Okay. The way I interpret that is if there is disagreement in interpretations in the base code, we don't want to be the one who is, this appendix shouldn't be the one that decides that we keep this, and so we would be silent on it as what.
I would agree with that.
Dustin, I think, can you, yeah, put it in there so that we did address it. Okay, and then code correlation. Are there any codes that we haven't addressed at this time? I don't.
Roger, I don't know if this, I don't, and Dustin, maybe you're going to answer this for me since I never dealt with the plumbing code. Does the UPC govern over the plumbing sections in the IRC?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Okay. I think,
and presumably the electrical code governs over the same thing, the electrical portions in the IRC.
I believe so. I'd have to check into how LNI does it, but I think the NEC trumps it all.
Okay. Yeah, those are the only two I can think of, Roger, but.
Then I think that we can go ahead and close that item as well. Obviously, during public comment, if there's a question that comes up, we can come back and address it. But as far as moving the proposal forward, I don't think we need to discuss it further. Okay. That we are at the end of our list. So I think, I don't believe that we need to vote today. Dustin will hopefully get the current document posted. relatively soon, and then we will have one more meeting that we come back and answer anybody's questions. So please review the documents, make sure one final time, make sure you've, if anything comes up, we can bring it up at the next meeting, and the hope will be at the next meeting, we can vote to forward these on to the BFRW. Okay. So on our agenda, I have other business, and I mentioned the meeting, the next meeting. And right now we do have a meeting on the calendar for December 30th. Let me get my calendar up so I'm referencing the right dates. However, knowing that the agenda item or the meeting schedule for the BFRW got moved to January 16th, we could postpone that meeting or not have a meeting on the 30th, and we could have a meeting on Tuesday, January 13th which would be 4 weeks from today, to make the final recommendations, and that only gives the BFRW 3 days to review it, but I think that that's actually sufficient. We can get we can ask that the BFRW review the version that gets posted ahead of time. So what do folks, I guess I'm assuming most people are going to suggest that we skip December 30th and have a meeting on January 13th. I see a whole bunch of thumbs up. Okay. I don't think we need to have a motion for that, Dustin.
No.
Okay. Let's get thanks, Patrick. Let's get the meeting on January 13th on the website, and go ahead and cancel the 30th. Okay, is there any other business?
Roger, even if you didn't have the 13th and you wanted to move it from the 30th between Christmas and New Year's, you could do earlier in January too.
I looked at the 6th, although I know that there are some people that have other standing meetings opposite of these.
Copy.
So that's why at one point we had talked about January 6th, but I think that there's, I don't know if it's a WABO meeting, and I don't know if they're meeting on the 6th, but if we do it on the 13th, that's plenty okay for the BFRW. Again, I'll get in touch with all of the voting members of the BFRW and
you bet,
point them to it so they can educate themselves further. So
yeah. Question for Dustin. Are the most recent edits, are they on the website? I have my local jurisdictions asking me for, the latest copy just to kind of peek through it.
So right now, the stuff that's online is current as of December 2nd.
Right.
There's some modifications resulting from today. I'm gonna try to get them wrapped up here this afternoon and get them online tomorrow. And for the EV stuff, I wanted to forward that back out to Patrick, Micah, and Richard just to make sure I didn't mess anything up. I'll incorporate all the edits. I'm gonna put it into all the baseline document with the reorganization, and just forward it out to people, make sure I didn't muss things up, and try to get it posted here midday tomorrow.
Sweet. Thank you.
Yeah, you're very
Dustin,
welcome.
I just sent you the document that we were looking at today with a couple updates from today's meeting.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, John.
And John, you're going to get him, or have you already gotten him the
figures
are in the inbox.
Figures. Okay. All right. All right. Well, we are almost there, everybody. I appreciate all of the hard work. I think we have 2 great documents that we are close to wrapping up. So everybody have a happy holidays, and we will connect again in January.
Thank you, everybody. Happy holidays.
Thanks, Dustin. Thanks, Roger. Happy holidays, everyone.
You'll-
Merry Christmas.
Yes.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Merry
Yes,
everyone.
Christmas.